Good morning, everyone here watching live, and those of you who are catching us in our YouTube channel. So it's much more fun if you're here, as you're going to see today. But if you're catching us on the YouTube channel, hopefully this is fun as well. This is our information series, and this particular session is our very first holistic admissions session. So this is an introduction to how holistic admissions work. There are a couple of different ways that students are admitted to a college. Holistic admissions is what they do with the University of California, many private colleges. There are also other public colleges that do it. So this is giving you a walkthrough through a case study so that you can see firsthand how it works. You are going to be the admission officers, those of you who are here in the room, if you're watching on YouTube, sorry, you don't get a vote, but the folks here, you are the admission committee. So you're going to decide who we accept, who we deny, and if we need to put anyone on a wait list. So let's talk about holistic admission and what elements go into it. So the first thing you have to know is that each college has their own mission and values. That changes what they look at, that changes their priorities, and that, we also don't know what that is. So we don't know what a college values that particular year. It may be that they need students who do X, Y, and Z this year, and they need students that do Z, Y, and X next year. We never know. It is out of our hands. It's just something to be aware of. Each college has their own method of evaluating students. Maybe they use a rubric. Maybe they have a discussion. Maybe they go off in pairs and read different applications and bring some of them back. There's all kinds of different ways that colleges evaluate students. That is not something within our control. You just do your best, and the college is the college. Now, colleges that use a holistic approach, meaning they look at the whole student, the circumstances, they usually have essays, they have grades, they may or may not look at test scores. There's all kinds of aspects that go into it. But one of the things they're doing is they're building a class. So it isn't necessary that they're cutting off all the top 10% and just grabbing those students. They are trying to build a well-rounded and interesting and diverse class. And when I say diverse, I actually mean that the class has people from many different situations. Like you can't have everybody in your school want to study computer science, which seems to be something that's happening now. So they're not going to choose all the computer science majors. They're going to also bring in some majors that are maybe classics majors and people that read and people that play sports and people that play bassoon. And it could end up in a situation like my son, where he ended up at a college where the orchestra, for some reason, was all oboes. I don't know how that happens, but he went to Reed College and it's weird and I'm just not surprised. But what we want is we don't want an orchestra that's all oboes. We also don't want one that's all violins. So an orchestra is a really good way to look at it. You need someone from all aspects of the orchestra in order to make it sound good. That's what's happening here when we say they're building a class and we need a diverse student body. Now, we're dividing this case study into three parts: academic, activities and actions, and context. So these are also the things that go into a typical holistic evaluation. So the most important thing are your grades. If they use test scores, then your test scores and your course rigor. And we actually have a session on course rigor coming up, like this whole academic thing. We have that coming up. And your activities can't really save you if your grades are not showing someone who could succeed at the college. So, you don't need perfect grades. You need the right grades for the college you're applying to. And so if this is a college where it's extremely academic, they're going to want to see higher grades. If it's a college where, the averages are Bs, then a student who has mostly Bs, maybe some Cs and As, they're going to get in, they're going to do fine at that college. So grades way more than everything else. Once you bypass grades, you go to the students' activities and actions. This is specific for holistic admissions. What do they do with their time? What do they do that might bring value to the campus? So the best way to know who a student will be when they get to your college is to know who they are now. So by looking at what they do, the type of person they are, we can go ahead and see who they'll be and how they'll add to the class. Remember, we want a diverse range of students. So it doesn't mean that everybody has to be a leader. People always say, how do I do leadership? How do I do community service? We want diversity of activities and actions. And last, we're going to look at the context of a student. So when you have a student who has a specific thing going on in their application, and sometimes you wonder, I wonder what's going on that might mean the student has no activities. Or I wonder what happened with this particular year. We can look at that too. The application gives the student, as well as the letters of recommendation, give the student a voice to explain any circumstances that they might need to explain. Okay, so what are we looking for at our college? I always let my students name this college and they always come up with something goofy, but we're not going to name the college today. It's going to be our fancy iLEAD college. That's what we're going to call it. We're looking for students who are academically prepared. They're going to do well at our college. They're going to be able to graduate, and who will also add value to the campus. So students that are going to bring something. We have a very active and vibrant campus at our iLEAD college. And we want students who are going to be participants in that kind of culture. So they got to be able to make it through school. They got to be good enough to make it through school. And they also have to be active enough to join in. So those are the two things that we're looking for. That's our goal. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the chat box here. I'm going to go ahead and make it so I can see it. And I want you to take a look at the screen. And I want you to take a look at our different students. Now, I've named them red, blue, green, yellow to try to keep names out of there, to try to keep genders out of there. What do you see in this slide that stands out at you about any aspect of the students here? So take a moment and drop some comments in the chat box that stand out about the different students. We've got education level of the parent. We've got the employment of the parent, the location of the family, the interest of the student, and some differences in the type of schooling. Let's see what you come up with. I'm going to wait you out, so see what jumps out. And I am going to wait you out. So tell me what stands out to you in the chat box. I'll give a bit of a hint. Yes, I was actually that was going to be my hint, Kathy. The parent education levels are vastly different. Yes, yellow is going to be a first generation student. That means that she is I know yellow is a she. That I know that means that she's going to be the first in her class or in her family, to go to college. Yellow student likely has practical experience related to the major. Yes, environmental studies and living on a farm with parents who are farmers. A lot of public and two parent. Yeah. You know, I did that just as I was stretching it out so I can have lots of different backgrounds, but not all our families are going to be traditional looking families. And this, yeah, big difference in the size of the high school. Let me ask a question. What do you think is going to be the difference between a student that comes from an 850 senior, that's the number of seniors, size of my oldest son's school, 850 seniors versus 25 seniors? These are the number of seniors. Do you think there's going to be any advantages or disadvantages? What are your thoughts? Yeah, maybe more options at the bigger school. Definitely. Definitely. What about, actually, I think we're hitting it. What about the employment? Let's take a look at that real quick. What do you notice? Is there anything important that we as an admission committee should be aware of and maybe want to know more about? Yeah, the unemployment. Look at Green's parents with their master's and bachelor's degrees, yet no jobs. I'm kind of curious about what's going on there and if it has had any kind of effect on the student. So these are all things that the colleges ask, by the way. So when you're filling out the Common App, they're asking about parent, they're asking about different situations. these are also things that the student has the ability to talk about in the application if there's something important that they feel the admission committee should know about. Okay, let me move to the next slide. Now, we're going to go through each student individually. This is Red. Red is interested in mechanical engineering. We have two GPAs, the weighted and the unweighted. So the 3.66 GPA is an unweighted GPA. That is the GPA that a student gets in the course. And you're seeing that GPA, A in geography, A in English 9, B in geometry. The 3.77 is what we call the weighted grade. So if the student takes an AP class, the student takes an honors class, or if the student takes a community college class, they get a bump. So if you look at that, let me find one here. Is there an honors? Yes, if you look at 10th grade, you could see AP chemistry. The student got an A, but they get the credit of having one level higher than an A. So if they had gotten a B, it would be averaged in like an A. If they get an A, it's going to be averaged in with an extra point. So that's why you see two different GPAs. And that is something that we want to pay attention to. Their SAT was actually quite good. Anything over a 700 is considered significant. The 500s are considered average. So an average average SAT score would be somewhere in the 500s. So this student scored above average. This next part is really important. The school offers 16 AP courses. Students have access to 16 AP courses. This student took 4 of the 16. What are your thoughts about a student who has access to 16 AP classes but takes 4? The question becomes, did they take advantage of what the school has to offer? What are your thoughts? This is one of those, there's no right or wrong answer. It's, what are your thoughts? Student has taken 4 AP classes out of the 16 possible. Drop that in the chat for me. Anyone have any thoughts about that? Okay, so Maggie says, sounds decent. Okay. And really, we're the admission officers. We get to decide what that means. Mira says, I guess it depends. Really with what works for the student. Yeah, not sure what's a bigger amount of AP classes. And we're actually going to be looking at some other students and we'll get an idea. And so, yeah, let's just keep that in mind. And the question we always ask is, did they take advantage of what they had access to? And it really also depends on what they have access to. Yeah, somebody has pointed out the student increased the amount of AP classes as they went. That is something important. The increase in rigor, that actually does matter, and that is something we want to notice. How impactful is it that they didn't get A's in their APs? Oh, we're going to have to think about that. People always ask, should you take an easier class or an AP class? Well, there's no answer to that. We're holistic. So I'm going to leave it up to you, the admission officers, on how you're going to judge that. I'm not going to give you an answer to that question. Let's take a look at the next student. We have Blue, excuse me, take a look at that GPA. By the way, the SAT, the highest sub-score you can get is an 800. This student has scored perfect scores on their SAT. So just understanding the context of the SAT. Their total offer of 18 AP classes and a total of 13 taken. We've also got honors classes and community college. So what do you think? We got a vote for academic rock star. A lot of AP and honors coming up in the chat. Yeah. Any other comments about this student? I guess one of the questions we always ask is, did they take advantage of what they had access to? Did they go beyond? And we got a good point out there. They enjoy music and orchestra. We can see sometimes within their choices what they may be interested in. You might also see that sometimes within the course list. Now, this student doesn't look like he has leaned into any specific type of pathway, but that is something that we want to keep an eye on. Okay, this one's pretty cut and dry. And by the way, I just want to point out semester one and semester two, you notice there's no grades for semester two. And that is because the we're in semester one. Applications happen in semester one. Some applications will come before your semester one grades are complete. The way we're doing this particular case study is we know the first semester grades, but semester two, we know what they're going to take, but we don't necessarily know how they did. Okay, let's go on. We've got green. Green is an interesting one. We've got a GPA that's a little bit on the lower side, but we still have weighted, which means that there was some AP honors going on. They decided not to turn in test scores. We don't know why. We don't know what the reason is, but they made that choice. We don't know what they had access to as a school, as admission officers. We don't know what they had access to. We know they've taken 4 AP classes, they've taken 3 honors, and they've got almost a full year of community college credits. So that's something kind of interesting. I want to point out this semester two, it says PL. That's the terminology for planned. So we know that they're going to be taking astronomy and anthropology in semester two. That is the predicted classes. And we can see that they took community college English, Japanese, semester one. So those together end up a full year. So just so you know. What do you think? What's going on? What patterns do you see? So we have a leaning towards sciencey classes and languages. Okay. 10th was rough. Stopped at Spanish 3, then took Japanese. We could see that in a couple different ways. We can see that as in the student has multi-interest in more than one language, or we can see it as they decided not to complete Spanish 3. Maybe they didn't have access. Sorry, Spanish 4, maybe they didn't have access. We don't know. We really don't know. But I want to point out that 10th grade, what's going on with 10th grade compared to the rest? What are your thoughts? We got a question, do all 4 years really matter that much? So I, as a college counselor, if I were giving you the generic information for this question, do all 4 years really matter that much? I would say, of course, you need to take all 4 years of your language. And I would have other counselors I hear them say the same thing, but that's not what I've seen. If you're going for the tippy top colleges, you want to max out everything as much you can, but there's only a handful of those colleges. I have seen students have success with a variety of different methods of languages. I feel like there's no one good answer for that question. We got to look at the student as a whole. We had an interesting response that one person was saying it's kind of cool that they did 2 languages. And another person saying, hey, they didn't go all the way to 4. So you're the admission officers. That becomes something you decide. Yeah, so someone's pointing out that happened before. Sometimes the next level isn't an option. And so this is something that we have to look at context now, and that's coming in the third part. Okay. Look at the suggestion in the chat box. Maybe 10th is when the parents became unemployed, and then the students switched to more dual enrollment. Interesting observation, and hopefully the student has told us. Okay. Let's check out student yellow, our final student. Remember, this is a student who is more of a rural student. So take it away. What do you see? What do you see with student yellow? And someone's commented in the chat box about choices their student wants to make. And we'll grab that in our Q&A if you want to talk about it. We had a lot of chatting about languages. Remind me when we do our Q&A, let's really talk about languages because that seems to be the one thing that makes everyone really nervous. So let's address that in our Q&A. Okay, we've got a good point here. There was no AP available, but they took community college. But look at also what is on the left-hand side about community college. When a student doesn't have access to something, they are not punished within the admissions. So if you're going to a school that has no AP classes, you really aren't expected to have those AP classes. You're expected to try to do the best you can with what you have. Remember, this student has 25 students in the senior class. That's about 100 students in the school altogether. They're rural. They're on a farm. So when they say we have limited access to community college courses and they've taken two of them, that tells us something, that a choice that the student has made, and that is to seek something out. Okay. Also, oh, really good grades in SAT scores. Yes. And I want to point out that this case study sometimes makes people nervous because they're like, I don't have 700s. No, no, no. Our particular college, the iLEAD Fancy College that we're going to call it, not all colleges are looking at this level of a score. So I don't want you to look at this and say, oh no, I've got to be perfect. You don't. This just makes our case study a little more fun. Okay. Let's take a look at all of them now. So you can see we've got our 4 students. We can see their interests. They want to go into mechanical engineering. They came from a public or private school. We can see blue is interested in business, went to a private school, green is journalism, public school, and yellow environmental science, and is at a small and rural school. We can see their GPAs and the difference. We can see that blue is standing out. We can see that the others aren't quite at the same level, but then again, we don't need perfection. We need students who will succeed at our college. That doesn't mean we need a perfect student, but, and then we can also, a couple people didn't catch it, but lower grades for red are primarily in science and math, and they have moderate rigor. Blue was taking the highest levels. Green had poor grades in 10th and an upward trend after 11th. That was pointed out by somebody. Somebody also wondered if Green's family might have had a reason for that. And yellow has very limited school offerings, but has taken the most rigorous courses. Yeah, someone's pointing out for Green, it's a good thing they bounced back after 10th grade. Yeah, and we want to be keeping an eye on that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do our first set of votes based only on academics. The only thing we could do at this point is academics. So when we're only looking at academics, we're looking at schools like our Cal States, CSU Long Beach and Cal Poly Pomona and places like that. They're only using academics. And but we're holistic. But let's just start with our round 1. So what I want you to do is I want you to choose 2 students. You're allowed to have more than one. Can you see the poll? You can choose 2 students to admit. I'm just checking. Can everyone see the poll? Because I have no votes. Let me know in the chat if you can see it. Okay, good. I see people voting. Let's see what we got. So you may choose 2 students to admit to iLEAD's fancy college. We got 5 votes out of 7. I'm going to give 2 more people a chance to vote. Hopefully you're here. I feel bad for red. Come on. Are we going to vote for red at all? Oh, apparently not. That's okay. That's okay. I'm the admission dean, so I don't get a vote. I can break a tie, but that's it. Okay, so we have going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. And we are going to admit yellow and blue. So that's in the first third, or we've done about a third of our admissions, and we have 2 students at this point that we think are going to be the best. We think that blue is going to be a great student, and we think that yellow, we had 100% with yellow. So that's where we are in the first third. But hold your thoughts, because this is not just about academics. This is also about what they do and who they are. This is holistic. Let's keep going. Now, when we add in this next section, we are talking about their activities and things that they do. So we look at things like, what activities did they participate in? What awards did they receive? What kind of personal responsibilities did they have? And this is really important. And a lot of students don't realize that when they have personal responsibilities, especially when you have a low income student who just doesn't, they're taking care of family members, or we have students who are maybe taking care of a grandparent. That actually is part of the activities and is part of the analysis. So if you have a lot of personal responsibilities, you're not going to be counted down because you didn't do all the things. That's one of the things. We also look at jobs and work experience and community service. Notice there's a lot of different ones. You don't have to do them all, but these are just things that we want to look at. So let's see what we got here. Okay, let's look specifically at red. And I laid this out similarly to what it would look like if you were filling out the common application. The common application goes to places like our private schools. People apply to Chapman, they use it. People apply to the crazy Ivy Leagues, they use it. It's used all over. So this is kind of the layout. Tell me what you see. What's interesting about them? Yeah, red is involved. Oh, this is really important. Red is involved in their interest of work and does community that involves that interest. We call this being pointy. Red is leaning towards their interest. When I was younger and applying to college, it was always about being well-rounded, but that's changed quite a bit. We do want to see people involved in the things that matter to them. So we want to see we want to see them involved in things that matter to them, not everything. Any other interesting things that you can find? Any interesting things that you can find? Look at the level of involvement, not just what they did. Many hours each week. Yeah, actually, quite a bit. What about in terms of how high they went in their community services engineering related? Definitely. Yes, interest with her community service, absolutely. Take a look again. What about level of award or level of participation? Does a student have anything very high level? Got a couple things in here. A lot of awards. What type? I'm circling the science fair. What do you see about the science fair? Is it just your regular school science fair? An international finalist. Yeah, we got state awards, regional and international level awards. We also got the gold award. It's not the gold award itself that matters in this case. It's what they did with it. So when you have a Girl Scout or Boy Scout, Eagle Scout or Gold Award, we want to really look at what they did with that award. Not just, I mean, the fact that they got it is significant, takes a lot of work to get it, but we also want to see they built a ramp for access. And so, yeah, this is red. And nobody voted for red. And I think that's kind of interesting. And I'm really curious to see where we go with red afterward because, yeah, compared to the others in the first set. But now I'm curious. Okay, this is our superstar. What do you think of him? What do you think of blue? So 5 instruments, self-taught and private instruction. Uh-huh. So there's no community. Everything's very student focused. Okay. They seem to be very fortunate for their options. I'd love a comment on what you mean by that, because I think I see where you're going. What else do you notice? What about compared to red? I mean, we just saw a very different student before them. How was blue The same or different from red? A lot of weeks per year, but lower hours. Yeah, very few activities in comparison to red. I'm going to point something out. Blue went to private school in New York. What do you think Blue had access to in terms of extracurricular activities? We have two parents who are doctors, went to a private school in New York. Do you think things were available to Blue, who most likely comes from a pretty high income family, considering it's a private school in New York? Yeah. And so the other thing you want to ask yourself is, did Blue take advantage of what they had access to? That's always a question. And so I leave that kind of, yeah, New York is very, I have a kid who lives in New York right now, and boy, is it expensive. Okay, let's go on to green. Green was our one that had some issues in 10th grade with a higher kind of a projection there going on later. What do you see about green? I'll give you a moment to read this because there's a lot of content here. What do you see about green? Works an after school job. Yes. How many hours a week? Yeah, 25. That's a lot for a full-time student. What else do you see that's interesting? Involved with their own interests, but take part in their community. Yeah. Self-motivated journalism and writing experience. Absolutely. Anything else that you just want to point out as we go through and try to decide on our class that we're building? Anything else that the student has done that they can bring with them? Yeah, that's an interesting one. They seem to reach out a lot since they want to do journalism and examine on their skills. Yes. So we got lots of stuff coming in the chat. Still maintained a YouTube channel in 11th and 12th on top of school and work. And by the way, if you've ever tried to do YouTube, 400,000 subscribers is unusual. It is not typical. So they have a very, very popular channel, possibly even to the point of making money on it. Okay. So we have one more student. Let's take a look at Yellow. Remember, Yellow was living on the farm, public school, it's very, very small, 25 students, and has taken the most rigorous in a school with very few options. Let's look at what Yellow's doing. What do you think? Give me some comments in the chat. I'll give you a second to read, and then tell me what you see. Pointing out a lot of the work has to do with farm work, and they got awards for the stuff they do in research. What level of award? National. Yeah, that's significant. We look at the level because participation and then participation at a significantly higher level is something that we want to definitely look at as we think about who we want to bring to iLEAD Fancy College. What else does a student do? Let me rephrase. Does it look like they have a lot of time to do activities? Yeah, help the family business. this is one of those situations where we have to look at their personal circumstances also when we kind of judge their activities. And this person is helping with the farm. You can see that in the family responsibilities, the first one. They're helping with raising the animals and other responsibilities to support the family farm. We have to take that into consideration as we look at overall what they're doing. The student says spends about 15 hours a week, but when you're living on a farm, I'm going to guess that they may not even be counting everything that they're doing because it's just life. Okay. Yeah, they're putting in about 20 hours a week between the farm and the store. Yeah, significant amount of work for a high school student. I think I only worked 2 days a week and I don't know, 10 hours when I was in high school. Okay, so we're going to go through the vote again. Just doing a quick review. We've got red, blue, green, and yellow. We've got now 3 sets of information, some just general information about them and their interests, their academics, but now we have added their activities. And we can see different levels of activity. We can see different amounts of activity. You can also look at whether their activity makes sense for their circumstances and if they've taken advantage of the things around them. So I'm going to give you a second to read through this just to kind of jog your memory. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put up the vote. We are going to vote 4-2. Let me do round 2. Oh, I see something in the chat. Yeah, trying to decide. Well, you know what? You don't have to be stuck between yellow and green because you still, at this point, get to choose 2. So you get both, Mira. Okay. So I've got 3 votes. We got to get up to 7. Okay. It's very interesting. You can't see it yet, but it's very interesting what's happening. So waiting on 2 more people to make their important decisions. Remember, these students are depending on you. So don't slack off now. Give a vote. 1 more, waiting on 1 more. Remember, we're admitting 2. Waiting for the last person. Going once. Quick, get your votes in there. Okay, there we go. Okay. And we are admitting, oh, we have a problem. We're admitting green. We don't know what's happening with red and yellow yet because we have a tie. Look how interesting what happened to blue. Yeah, red and yellow are going to battle it out, actually. In our next section, we're going to get context. And so we need a lot more context to really understand what's happening with each student. And without context, it really doesn't, we don't know. And so we don't have to make that decision yet. I will force a decision in the long run, but this time we're still moving on to the next section. So poor blue. Blue won the last time, but not this time. Okay, we have one last section to take a look at. We are going to look at the context of each individual student. And this is where we hear the student's voice. So this is where the student gets to write their essay. They get to indicate any interesting things or problematic things that are going on in their world. This is where the student gets to actually answer questions, all kinds of things like that. So we're looking at their essay and what are called supplemental essays. So the essay is going to be the main essay that all students have access to. Individual colleges can ask specific questions. They might ask, like, why do you want to come to our college? Or they might ask, tell me about a time when this happened. So we hear their circumstances. We also have recommendations from teachers and your counselor. So if you are here and you are in 11th grade or you have an 11th grader, they should be making sure they get to know their counselor because the counselor is going to be writing the letter. And don't worry, our counselors ask for brag sheets. They're going to come and talk to you. They're going to have a long conversation before they write anything. And then there's the opportunity for the student to just give other information. So this is where we learn about the students. Take a moment. Remember, there on the left, we have information about red, their interests, their grades, and their activities. But now we have a personal essay where she discusses her love of engineering as a way of connecting. She talks about aspects of projects, working with younger students. We have our college supplement where we ask kind of why are you coming and what do you want to study and why? So we're asking them, why us? Why do you want to come to iLEAD Fancy School? And she mentions the lab, projects, professors. What else do you see that may be important for our decision making? A learning difference in math. Yes. What else do you see that might really affect how we make our choice? You sure you're looking at those recommendations? What does her counselor and her teacher say about her? Yeah, helps and encourages younger students and classmates. What's she like in the classroom? This is where why your teachers are so important. They're the school's eyes and ears in the classroom. And we want to know how a student is going to be participating at Fancy Pants iLEAD College. What does the science teacher say? So we have a comment, Red is very well liked in the community, very passionate with their work and research. Sounds like a student passionate about the subject who works hard in spite of difficulty. I want to point out that the science teacher, this is not very common, but the science teacher made a statement about one of the very best in her entire career as a science teacher. And we want that to have a little bit of weight in our decision making. So even though the student has a learning difference in math, and it impacts her performance, the science teacher is saying, even with that, in the classroom, this is one of the very best students that she's ever seen. Okay, let's take a look at blue. What we got here? Tell me what you think. Remember, you're admission officers. What are your thoughts? You're supposed to be discussing this at a table. It's just a chat box. What do we know about blue? Anything stand out to you? Not well-rounded. Has the most opportunities, but doesn't seem involved or diverse. Yeah, those opportunities are something that I think we should pay attention to. There's a reading between the lines here. Take a look at those recommendations and tell me how they differ from red. What's going on with the teacher and counselor recommendation? What do you learn when there's nothing being said? You don't learn much at all. I'm leading you somewhere though. When the counselor who knows this is a private school counselor who should know every student and yet is not saying anything. And the teacher as well. They're not saying anything, not engaged, quite possibly. This might even take a phone call from the college counselor. Like, what is going on and why is there nothing being said? Is there something I should know? They only talk about his academic, yeah, maybe some conflict happening within. Yeah, it's an interesting situation, and we don't have a lot of information, but that in itself is information. Maybe he waited to the last minute and he asked the counselor at 5 o'clock the night before the application was due. We have that happen. Please don't do that. Please don't do that to your counselors. They will write you a letter, but they'll write you a good letter. But you know, I'm really curious about why there's no content here, why there's no context, especially at a private school. Okay, let's take a look at green. We put an extra note in here last year. The information on green could hit close to some of you. These are real life situations and it's perfectly acceptable. So you'll see in a moment, when we did this last year, we were right in the middle of the fires. And we've been using the fires year after year for green. Let's look at what he's written about in his essay, in his supplement, and what the counselors say. I'll take you a moment to read. And when you have some thoughts, go ahead and drop them in the chat. What is green's context? Okay, we got some coming into the chat. A lot of difficult times and preserves much attention and respect from the teacher, but more so of the counselor mentioning their situation. Good, you're picking up on it. What else do people see with green? Tell me more about green's context. Yeah, this is an interesting one. Personal experience that led to journalism. And if that's something that's going on with you and your own interests or situations that lead to things, it's definitely something that you want to talk about if you have a kind of what we call a why this major supplemental question. So what have we learned about green? Give time for a few other answers. We got a couple people holding the chat. We got to get some more people in the chat telling what you think. Just a question for the chat. Do you think that the context explains here would change your mind about a student? I'm also seeing if people are awake in the chat. Do you think that the context matters? Do you think that this helped you understand those 10th grade grades? Yeah, we've got perseverance is for sure important. And yes. I'll read what it says. I think there's a thing to mention that they might have been robbed of opportunities in the beginning years and possible future ones as well. And that's something we think about as our deciding on who and what matters. Yeah, you're a lot more empathetic towards green now. Yeah, definitely. And I think it's important that even though you can be empathetic, we still need to make sure the student can succeed at our college. And so we do still need to take we still need to take the grades into account. And so the question is if you remember that we still have that raising of grades after the situation happens. So, we decide still if the student, even with their dip in grades, was that a fluke? And so the question is, was that a fluke that was recoverable? And okay, we got another comment. I also wonder if admissions people are apathetic or some maybe aren't. Says, I would be, but I know of some who would not be. And what's interesting, Kelly, pointed out that would people actually care? And I can tell you also that there's more than one person reading in almost all cases. So it isn't up to one person to read. And with places like the University of California and others, they bring in readers who then kind of look through and use a rubric, and then that goes to another reader, and then the outside readers aren't the decision makers. It goes through processes. And so you're not dependent on one human kind of stamping something yes or no. So I want to make sure that you realize that you're not in the hands of one person who just might be mean. Okay, we got one more to go, and that is our yellow, who is our rural student who had limited opportunities. Tell me what you see. Some pretty important stuff here for yellow. So drop your thoughts in the chat as they start to come to you as you read. Yeah, due to being rural, a lot of opportunities couldn't have been used. I think this is really important because this is about the context. Yeah, keep going. What else do you see? Long commute on top of working on the farm. Yeah. Counselor and teacher mentioned this student is absolutely willing to keep learning and learned all they can. Remember, we're talking about what they took advantage of based on what they had. No worries to the person that's sneaking out. Thanks for letting me know. Has done a lot with what's available to her. Yeah, this is really important. Has done a lot based on what they have. We don't take away something because they don't have access to it. We look at what they have access to and how they did with it. Okay, I think this is going to be our final vote. Here's a reminder, take a moment to go through that as I get our poll ready. Yeah, the student's interest is very personal to them. Okay, you ready for this time we're going to be voting in two ways. You're going to be voting first on who you want to admit, and then you're going to be voting on who you want to deny. We've got four people, so you get to choose two you want to admit and one you want to deny, and then we're going to wait list the other one. So here we go. Choose two that you want to admit and choose one who you want to deny. And remember, there are two questions, two you want to admit and one you want to deny. Waiting on two more people to respond. Remember, their lives are in your hands. Don't flake out on us now. You got to vote. One more. Come on, we've got a tie here. You can't see it, but we've got a tie here. If you are that person that hasn't voted, we really need you. Going once. Please vote because your vote's going to change everything. Going twice. The last person's not going to vote. Here we go. We have a problem. We know who we're going to admit. We're going to admit yellow. And we know who we're going to deny. We're going to deny blue. But who are we going to admit for our second one, and who are we going to waitlist? So we have a problem. We have red and green. So we're going to have a runoff. So we're admitting yellow, we're denying blue. But I'm going to rerun one of the polls. And it's only going to be between red and green. So give me just a second. I'm going to go ahead and run one more poll. I've got to go back. I've got to reset. Relaunch poll. Okay, you can only vote on one, and it's either red or green. Only vote on red or green. One vote. And I think, Mira, one of the things you're saying, blue would do well in a heavy academic environment. This just may have been the wrong school for him. And he would do great at other schools where things would make a difference for him. So a rejection from one school does not mean a rejection from all. Okay, we've got our votes and the tally is in, and we are admitting yellow and red. We are denying blue. Oh, whoops, sorry. Share results. We are admitting yellow and red. We are denying blue. And we are waitlisting green. Sorry, green. Maybe red, maybe somebody will say no and green will get in. Let me stop my sharing. And those were the results. So what's really interesting to me is every time I run this, this particular webinar, the results are different. And so I never know who it's going to be at the end. Yeah, so we ended up with yellow and red and green, sorry, green, and blue will find a place. He needs to go to a place where people eat, sleep, and breathe academics. Okay, we have some more coming up. We're going to do the holistic admission, but we're going to be looking at UC specifically next time. And looking at the 13 factors that matter specifically for the University of California. We're going to be looking at rigor on the 20th, extracurricular activities, and we're going to look at testing. So we're dividing all these things up into small webinars next time. By the way, we have a tour coming up, Vanguard, on the 30th. If you're watching at home, depends on when you see this, but otherwise, if you are here, I can give you the link if you're interested in signing up. So I'm going to go ahead and sign us off for those watching on YouTube. And everyone else, you're welcome to stick around for a Q&A.